Let me start by welcoming everyone. My name is Scott Traylor. I'm the Bay Area president for the Children's Media Association. Thank you all for coming. It's great to see so many of you, my friends and colleagues from around the world. And I'm just going to start off by saying and reminding everyone, CMA is an organization that is of benefit to professionals that work in the children's media industry. We are many years old and currently have 3 chapters and talking about expanding into other cities. And we couldn't do it without our membership's help. Thank you all if you're a member. If you're new to CMA, welcome. Thank you for joining us. And please do check out our website. Consider joining. We have many great events coming up in the weeks and months ahead, and you'll be hearing more about them if you sign up on our website. And I'm just going to hand over today's event to our moderator, Lori Takeuchi, who is also the Bay Area Vice President. Take it away, Lori.
Thank you, Scott. So yes, I'm Lori. I'm Vice President of the Bay Area chapter of the Children's Media Association. And on behalf of the CMA BA, I'd like to welcome you to today's panel on playtesting with kids. Okay, so before we get started, there are 4 things that we'd like to accomplish in our short hour together. First, we want to build an understanding around the importance of playtesting and the challenges associated with doing it well. Inspire folks who are already playtest devotees with some new methods that may provide them with better insights. Illustrate the offerings of the website Playtesting with Kids. And lastly, shine a spotlight on 5 stars in the kids media development space. So these 5 stars include Courtney Chin, who is Director of Learning Insights and Design at Noggin, Dr. Kylie Sobel, Senior User Experience Researcher for Duolingo, Sharon Rylander, Senior Director of User UX Research for Square Panda, Dr. Robert Tom Kalinowski, Director of Design Research and Consumer Insights for Age of Learning, and last but not least, UX Researcher and Design Strategist, Dr. Kathy Tran. So that's all I'm going to say about them. If you're really interested in learning more about their backgrounds, which are very impressive, please visit the event website for this event to see their full bios. And I can actually drop that into the chat right now. Oh, somebody else did for me. So there it is. Okay, so as for what we're going to do today, Kathy Tran is going to first spend a few minutes introducing the concept of playtesting. Then we're going to move on to a panel followed by a demo of the Playtesting with Kids website. And then we're going to open it up for questions. And then we'll circle back to Scott for a few more words. And with that, I'm going to let Kathy go ahead and get us started. Kathy.
Great. I am very excited to see the crowd here today. We're excited to share insights and discuss one of my absolutely favorite topics, playtesting. And when we say playtesting, what we mean is testing out products with kids to learn from them to make the products better. We'll be referencing this toolkit today, playtestwithkids.org, that was published by the Joan Ganz Cooney Center at Sesame Workshop. And all the methods and case studies are curated by a wonderful group of collaborators in the community who do playtesting with kids. And it's a guide to prepare for your testing session and decide what you want to learn. So for instance, one of the goals of playtesting can be usability, to learn whether kids know how to use your product or not. As an example of this, Sago Mini School has an app for preschoolers called Jump and Spell. And their usability question was, what is the best user interface design to help kids accurately move their jumping character from platform to platform? And as you see here, they started out their playtesting with a paper prototype, a piece of paper and some characters to see how kids interact with it to make it jump. And then they had a very simple program on the iPad with placeholder images to test out this usability question. Another common category of questions for playtesting is engagement, to understand if kids are learning and if they're having fun. So an example of this is Google Assistant has an activity called Animal of the Day on their voice assistant. And their playtesting question was, what types of animal facts are most interesting to kids? And what they did early on in the development process was they had different pictures of voice assistant devices and asked kids which one they had at home. And in a video chat, they would show the kid's device on the screen, complete with the blinking lights. And the researcher then had this diagram script where they conversed with the kids as if they were having a conversation with the voice assistant to discover what types of animal facts are most interesting to them. These are both case studies on playtestwithkids.org if you're interested in finding out the answers to these questions. Why is playtesting uniquely challenging with kids? So the unique challenges was part of our motivation to bring together this panel today and also to create the Playtest with Kids Toolkit. One main challenge is kids really want to please you. And I have a 4-year-old and it's been really fun. I sign her up for a bunch of playtesting sessions to see how it goes. And one of the things that recently happened was she was playtesting a game and we were done playing the game on the app. The person on the other side asked her and thanked her for playing, asked her if she liked it. She nodded and she said yes. And the moment I ended the Zoom call, she turned to me and said, "Mom, like, can we turn this off? I don't want to play it anymore." And so clearly she did not like the game. And, you know, her intentions were good, right? She didn't want to tell this person on the other side, like, no, like, I don't like this game that you just showed me. And so we asked the community to curate methods and ideas on, well, what do you do about this challenge? We know it's a thing that happens. And one of my favorite methods from the Playtest with Kids toolkit is called Younger or Older. And it's asking the kid, telling them, you know, I'm not sure what age this game is good for. Do you think we should have it for kids younger than you, about your age, or someone older than you? And when I've used this question, I've gotten things like, oh, definitely a kid younger than me. The characters are super babyish. You know, my little sister might like it, but this isn't for me. Or definitely for someone older than me. This was really complicated. I didn't know how to play it. I don't think it's for kids my age. And so by framing the question differently, you're able to get, you know, honest feedback, much more helpful feedback to guide product development. And then a second challenge that I wanted to share is kids are nervous about feeling judged, and they also feel bad when they can't do something. And so if they can't figure out how to play a game, they can't figure out how to operate a robot, you know, they don't feel good about themselves. They get upset, they get frustrated. And so one of the challenges, ways of approaching this challenge is a method that it's what it sounds like, product blame. You blame the product when it happens. So if you notice a kid is frustrated, saying something like, "Oh, wow, that was confusing. Thanks for letting me know so that someone can fix this to make it better for the next kid." And so kids may feel like not knowing something is a reflection of themselves, but it's not. And adults understand UX research and the process a lot more than a kid does. And so working with kids is uniquely challenging, but also uniquely really fun. And I know that our panelist has a lot more to share about that and stories to share. And so I'll turn it back to Lori to get that started.
Thanks, Kathy. Very cool. We'll get to see more of the website after the panel. Okay, so let's move on to the panel itself. Okay, so the first question I have is for Kylie and Courtney. The first question is, what's a product where testing played a big role? And how did testing influence the development of this particular product? And let's have Kylie go first.
Okay, sure. Happy to. Hi, everyone. Okay, so as Lori, I think, mentioned, I'm a senior user experience researcher at Duolingo. And at Duolingo, I get the great opportunity to do UXR on Duolingo ABC, which is Duolingo's new literacy learning app designed for kids ages 3 to 8 to help them learn and love to read. And so playtesting has played a huge role in every aspect of the app. I've been at the company for a little over a year. And so during that time, I've playtested all sorts of content, features and experiences with kids of all ages. But I think a good example that's more recent would be a part of the app that we're working on now, which is our newer kind of, they're called read on my own stories, which is for second graders or 7 to 8-year-olds to practice reading without the app reading the text to them. So I had also had the pleasure of working on the website itself. So I tried to think about how I use the different methods in the website to help me with this. So I did many rounds of testing. First, we separated the content from the actual product and had kids read PDF copies of the different stories. So we could really assess the story's appeal, like how much kids like them and kind of the difficulty level of the text. And we watched videos of kids reading the stories and had them give feedback, like recounting the stories back to us in their own words. They also talked about if the story seemed like if it was for a kid older or younger or their age, and picked adjectives that they thought applied to the story, which is a method called adjective ask. And then we did a couple more rounds with Figma prototypes with the story content and rough illustrations, and a test flight prototype to really get in on kids' pain points around usability, and see how that kind of like flowed with actual rest of the game experience as well. And this has really shaped the content of the story. So how much suspense and surprise and creepiness we've put into them, and kind of helped us find our creative voice, while also resulting in a more usable reading experience that shows a connection between the stories and sort of the rest of the game as well.
Sharon. Thanks, Kylie. It's awesome. Sharon.
Thanks, Kylie. I have a few visuals that I can share here. So Courtney from Noggin, which is the preschool learning app from Nickelodeon from Junior, and I want to talk about the Noggins 1, 2, 3 series, which I have pictured here, and they're featuring preschool math skills, and they're really sort of bite-sized introductions to various math skills. So it's a short video where a child can see the skill, and then a really short interactive where they can practice the skill. And these are for preschoolers, so like 3 to 5, but a lot of times, we say our sweet spot is with 3 to 4-year-olds. And really from playtesting sort of spotlit two issues that we found. One is how the skill is presented across the video and the interactive. And the second is about our wrong WA feedback, which is wrong answer feedback structure. So meaning when a child is interacting, they tap it's asked to tap on the right answer, they tap on the wrong answer. What is the audio that they're hearing to redirect them? So I'll walk you through quickly what this looks like for this particular game called Animal Train, where we were teaching about ordinal numbers. So in the short video portion, they see all these animals here. You see each of these animals is holding a ticket with an ordinal number on the ticket. And in this part of the narrative, they're about to get on the train, but we need to put them in order. So by the end of the short video, you see these little guys in the cute little train conductor outfits and overalls are our noggins, and they have put all the animals in order. That's how the skill was presented in the video. By the time we get to the interactive, there's a little introduction here showing the ordinal numbers again, but they're tasked with looking at a train and saying, okay, this little tiger dressed noggin has the third ticket. He's trying to get on the third car, tap on the third car. So we see the skill presentation here is actually the skill that they're asked to do is actually a little bit different. They're not placing ordinal numbers that they see in the correct order. They're actually asked to identify what is the third train car here. So this revealed a challenge when we're going from our video portion into our interactive portion. You want to extend the narrative, right? There's a mixing of wanting to have a really engaging narrative that makes sense and that has a flow, but also they're preschoolers. They need repetition, repetition, repetition. That's definitely the way that we need to teach our littles. So we realized here from testing with some of the challenges specifically that we saw with 3-year-olds that to them, you know, this may have presented more like, how do I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and put 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 rather than making the connection between the numeral they're seeing on the ticket and being able to count those train cars. So for the future, for our future games within the series, we focused on making sure that the narrative the narrative extends in a way that is showing the exact same skill presented in the video portion, and then that they are able to practice that exact same skill in the interactive portion. Another challenge here that we had was really just with supporting our 3-year-olds the best. So a typical hint structure, or what we call a wrong answer feedback structure that we might use is after the first wrong answer, a child will hear, nope, try again. We don't want to give away everything. We want to give them another chance to get it themselves and feel like they can master it. After the second wrong answer, we might remind them, no, remember, you're looking for the third train card. And then after, if they get yet another wrong answer, like they tap yet again on the wrong train card, that's when we do what we call the giveaway, where we say, nope, you're looking for the third train card, and then the third train card will highlight. For us, that gave us pause because that was sufficient enough for the 4-year-olds, not sufficient enough for the 3-year-olds. So to better support them through what we call productive struggle, we adjusted some of our wrong answer feedback to give them more strategy. And instead of just reminding what the target is, saying, start counting from here, and directing their attention to the first train car. So it sort of gives a hint that allows them to, again, struggle a little bit more productively and still finding the answer, the third train car, on their own. So yes, that's how our playtest learnings are really applied to the rest of the content within our series.
Thanks, Courtney and Kylie. Okay, so moving on. Second question is, what's a method that you tried that didn't work out well? And how did you answer that playtest research question instead? So this time we're going to talk with Robert and then Kylie again. Robert.
Hello, everyone. So you'd like me to respond to this one first? I'm up first here?
Yes.
All right, great. So my response here is I'm going to tell you a story, and this story is going to go big. And I think that the main message that I'd like this audience here to take away from this is that even if you're not the director of a research program or of many research programs, sometimes you still got to go big with something and advocate for a bigger research program to solve a complex problem. Because sometimes the other methods just won't work. And I'll give you an example of that. So Age of Learning developed over many years this beautiful product. It's called My Reading Academy. It's truly adaptive. There are all these, like the brain, the adaptive engine behind this app is just incredible. So it knows what the kid knows based on what they're doing within the app, and then it delivers to them just right challenges just at the right moment. And we play tested and developed this using many of the methods you guys already heard about, right? So, so far so good. It's on its developmental trajectory. It's being developed just fine, swell. Well, then the organization decides, hey, this is a school's product. So now we're talking about something that is intended to be used by a preschooler or a kindergartner alone with a tablet, but we're talking about selling this to schools. Now, I don't know if any of you here work in the schools market. It's totally different. There are all kinds of different regulations and standards, and all of them are, it's like different state to state, locality to locality. There's all sorts of cultural components to think about, language components to think about, funding, different philosophical approaches to tech. It's many, many different variables here. And of course, putting the tablet in front of the kid is not going to help us cross the finish line with making this a successful school's product. So I ask you guys, let's say that you're currently working in a role in design research or user research, or let's say you've already been doing it for a while and you're a leader, right? What do you do? You talk to some teachers, you talk to some district administrators. We did that, that's fine. But in this case, it's not enough. What we did for a real solution, and this is part of my job too, is I had to advocate for this within the organization and get some substantial buy-in to take on such a huge study. It's not going to work individual kids. We went on the schools level. So we formed relationships with schools. Well, they didn't have the devices. We got the devices. We had like special order from China, iPads. Oh, they don't have the way to plug them in. They don't have the way to roster them. We figured it all out so that we could deliver these devices to the kids and make it work. And it took months. But in doing that, we were able to see just the absolute magical chaos unfold of having 4-year-olds running around a room. You got to corral some of them for center time. You got to log them in. Oh, kids looking over each other's shoulder. They're logging into each other's things. Oh, that's a giant pain point. We have to fix the login. We have to fix the login flow. Headphones. You need headphones. It's noisy. But a kid has a question, so they unplug the headphones. Now the iPad's blaring out noise into the classroom. You got to get help from a teacher. So these are just some of the examples of user problems that we could not have discovered using our prior methods. So again, I would urge anyone here to think big, think outside of the toolbox. The toolbox is, well, first of all, this resource that we're talking about here, the playtesting kit, is magnificent. Definitely check it out. But the toolbox is really anything. In social science, the data generating process is there. People are there doing things in a way that can be patterned and understood and used to predict human behavior. So I think it's on the researcher to advocate for bold ways to find out what the data generating process is doing.
All right. I'll take it. I'm going in a very different direction. So Robert went really big. I'm going to take it super small, which I think hopefully will be good because it's a contrast. So I think when I was trying to think about was the different methods that we have on the website, and when I've tried to use one or adapt it to a situation and it didn't really work. So like Kathy said, when she was first presenting, kids want to please you, right? So oftentimes you can't just ask, did you like this? Because they're going to say yes. So there was a time when, this wasn't dire or anything, but we have a method card on the site, which is called Pick 3 Faces. And the idea is that you provide a number of emoji faces like smiling and frowning and laughing or sleeping or a zip mouth. Basically a bunch of faces that might open up a discussion to get more feedback. So you might ask after they play with something, which of these do you feel like, and then it could open up more discussion. So in one of my studies that I was running, I tried to use this method, but it was an asynchronous remote study. So, and instead of putting different emoji faces, I tried to kind of like take a shortcut and adapt and make it into like a smiley-ometer, if you've heard of it before. So instead of 5 different kind of like general faces, I did faces that went from like, kind of frowny all the way to a big smile, along with a myriad of other questions. Well, I'm sure it's not that surprising that every kid gave it a big smiley face, regardless of how they felt, because they wanted to give a smiley. They didn't want to give something that they didn't show that they liked it. But what was lucky, I think, in that moment is that I had a lot of other context clues that the smiley alone didn't mean that this was like thumbs up how it was, right? I had recordings of the actual playtesting session. I actually used the adjective ask method cards. That's like different words that you could use to apply to it. So there could be like boring in there. And it basically just showed me I couldn't get around. I just wanted some straightforward answers from 1 to 5, sort of like a Likert scale, but I just couldn't do it. So I think you can't take shortcuts, I think is the takeaway from there. And you gotta use your whole qualitative picture to know how kids really feel.
Thanks, Kylie. Okay, and Robert. Okay, moving on. Third question is, we know nothing ever goes quite as planned working with kids. Do you guys have any funny playtesting stories to share? And we're going to start with Sharon because she hasn't had a chance to go yet, and then Courtney.
Hi, yeah, so many stories. Kids are very cute, as we all know. One that jumps to mind for me is there was a boy who came in about 8 years old, and he was so excited. This is when I was working at a consumer robotics company, and kids would get really excited. And he was particularly excited to the point that his little body's just moving all over the place the whole time, as a lot of kids do. But it was to the point that any grown-up involved, like the mom and myself, et cetera, would periodically ask him, like, do you need to go to the bathroom? And he's like, no, no, no. He's just that excited. Until there's that moment when I look over and he's doing a full-on downward-facing dog, like beautifully positioned, you know, yoga magazine cover down. And he goes, Miss, I think I need to go. Too late. And it was that's when you know you have a great product going on. So I have to say that it was like he'll be mortified the rest of his life. The rest of us were just it was so precious and so sweet. And the hardest part about it is you just have to completely stuff down all of that joy that you have at how cute the situation is, into just, you know, that very, very neutral energy, no big deal, just rolling along, you know, just to save it for him. But that was hard. So, anyway.
Oh, Sharon, I also had a go-to like bathroom story. I mean, the bathroom ones are always, you know, the winners. You're always going to get a handful of those. And I work, was previous at Sesame Workshop, so spent a lot of time in the preschool space. A lot of potty training going on. So, but in the interest of giving a little variability here, I'll give another story. So, I used to do a lot of focus groups with preschoolers. That sounds ridiculous, I'm aware. But when working with a lot of linear content, we are showing storymatics, sort of like digital storyboards, or to get a sense of children's comprehension, not so much engagement, but comprehension. So doing these things in groups is actually a lot more helpful to get beyond the surface thinking and to get beyond, you know, the awkward barrier of like, there's a stranger in my classroom, you know, because we would go to preschools and sit on the floor with them. And so when it comes to the interview time, you know, I sit on the floor in front of like 6 3 or 4 year olds. And I used to have my hair in a braid to sort of keep it out of the way. So I had really long hair. At first it was really exciting when Hunger Games was hot, that everyone called it my Katniss braid, and then Frozen. So then it was the Elsa braid. So sometimes during sessions, it would just become very attractive to the point where all of a sudden I'm just covered in 6 children, all like clamoring for my braid because they really want to stroke it. There's a lot of that going on. So, you know, there's a lot of really navigating and getting a sense of like, okay, who's really going to talk to me out of these few kids? Like, who can I really get the most out of? Who's the most articulate? Because they're 3 and 4, and sometimes they know a lot, but they just can't tell you, and I need you to tell me because I don't speak 3 and 4 all the time. So sometimes what I have ended up doing actually is I can sort of pick out over the course of an interview, pick out which kids I can best, you know, who were on the same plane, like I can hold on to their focus a little bit more and get a little bit more information out of them. But there are, you know, 4 or 5 other 3 and 4 year olds who really want my attention. And so sometimes what I found is really helpful is just sort of extending my hand. And then all of a sudden you'll have 4 or 5 you know, children just sort of stroking my hands. And I used to have a few rings on my hands that were just loose enough to spin. So it became sort of a spinner toy for kids, that if I really needed them to stop going, miss, let me talk, or like, do you want to hear what I did this morning? Or like, do you want to hear about my Batman birthday party? Like, so to sort of quell that, I sort of give them my hand, let them spin my rings, Another thing is I have tattoos, you can see the blur, but I have little tattoos on my wrists, which I usually keep covered to minimize distraction. But if I need some kids distracted so I can finish a really good conversation with another kid, I pull up my sleeves a little bit and then have a bunch of little preschoolers trying to scratch my tattoos off my wrist. So pro tip, but anything that works. So you can use distraction as a fun tool as well.
Those were very funny stories. Thank you both. Okay, thanks. All right. Number 4, what are the main barriers that prevent teams from playtesting? And how can they overcome these barriers? And for this question, I'd like to turn it back to Robert and to Sharon.
Hi. Yeah, so I think one of the big barriers is going to be resource, right? Product teams are very busy. They already have something else to do. They have their sprint, if they're on a sprint methodology, and their goals. And it's just challenging to try to get into something that you really know nothing about. A low-hanging fruit that I've seen many products use to good effect is to just do like informal internal testing, like with your colleagues' kids or your own kids. And then in that case, using this playtesting toolkit resource from CMA and the Cooney Center is a great starting point. It's a great primer. So read that resource and then just try to do what you can. Fake it, just fake it. I have something encouraging to share. So Jakob Nielsen, principal of the Nielsen Norman Group, which is an international top-tier user research firm, he did some very careful work and found that across populations, so it's not specific to kids, but across populations, you get fantastic insights with even an N of 1. So he did really careful work and found, like, on the whole, you do user research with one person and you can uncover 35% of user issues with your product. So 1 is way better than nothing. The point of that paper is that you get diminishing returns. So the big takeaway is you get over 90%, you uncover over 90% of issues with user testing with 5 people, although it depends on populations and so on. But I would be encouraging to say you can uncover a lot with just 1 kid. So jump in there and just fake it. Another concrete example, so this strategy can work well for many. Partner with a research organization near you. Get to know a lab that's in this space. You're super lucky if you're in Seattle area or if you're in Irvine, because there are big labs there that do this kind of work. I see even Valerie Vigil is on this call, Miranda's son, so some veterans from the Digital Learning Lab are here. There's going to be a pool of skilled doctoral students, maybe even professors who want to partner with you. And I'll just share one final example. So I was working on a project with an NSF ASIL grant, Advancing Informal Science Learning, where Eleanor from Eleanor Wonders Why talks back to you using the Alexa voice agent engine, a super cool project. But in doing that, we were partnering with PBS SoCal. And now I'm creating this relationship. I got hooked up with Susie Grimm, who was there at the time, who's also on this call. And that created a relationship whereby they then had this conduit to a lab, an important university lab that could help them with this kind of thing. It actually formed one of the most important working relationships of my life. And I got to do this thought piece for PBS SoCal that I'm very proud of. So partnering with universities and fake it till you make it.
Great. So I've been working with startups for the past about 20 years. And so that's where most of my experience is in. And I will say that this would apply really to UX research in general. When you go into a new organization that's young and has never done UX research before, there's often a lot of resistance, and understandably so. People's jobs feel threatened and all of that. So my first order of business is to convince everybody that I am there to make them look like a superstar. That's my role as a UX researcher. And so what I have found is all it really takes is one program. After that first program, everybody softens up and then they're asking for it at that point. does need to be well run. That's where experience comes in. But I would say that's just kind of a general piece of advice if you're going into a new situation where all of this is kind of new. The other things that I see all the time are, again, along with the startup environment, lack of budget, lack of resources, lack of infrastructure. You may not have a location, et cetera. So, like Robert's advice of partnering with a local agency is a really good one if you have the funds for that. If you don't have the funds for that, you have to start getting very creative. The lack of prototypes could be an issue. That's where I think the Playtesting with Kids website is really great, because you can see great examples of how you could do hyper low fidelity testing before you have prototypes, in fact, depending on what stage of development you're in. The other thing I would say is, again, if you are just coming into a new situation, somebody hired you, so there's at least one ally in the organization that can help you navigate any sort of initial politics until you can kind of prove the worth of the activity itself. And then I think I can probably wrap up there. I think we might be talking about tips later, some practical tips, but I can throw those in now if you want, Lori. Otherwise, I can wait.
Oh, we can wait, because that'll be sort of
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
But thanks. Great. All right. Kylie and Courtney, how has your remote testing process evolved? Can you share a key method or two for remote testing that's really made a difference in providing you with valuable insights? Kylie, why don't you
Sure,
start?
I'll start. Okay, so I am such a fan of doing remote research. I've really been converted through the pandemic that it has just allowed me to get, there are obviously many challenges, but it's allowed me to get feedback from kids and families all across the world in a way that I have not been able to do before, right? Otherwise, it's been very localized. So one huge game changer for me in my job at Duolingo has been using the platform Dscout, which I am like a huge fan of. And what I've done with that platform is create a panel of families, so you can set up screeners. And I got about 50 families, thanks, with kids throughout our age range that consistently participate in what they call missions with us. And that way, you could only use it for particular situations where you don't need like an active user from the app right now or from your platform, but you have parents and kids that are consistently working with you, that are become familiar with you, become used to sort of like the logistical setup that is necessary for remote research. So it's been like indispensable. But in terms of like actual methods, like drawing again from the website, I think room ratio has been really important. So what's really awesome about doing remote research is that lots of stakeholders on your team can watch. But just like in a regular room, you don't want, if you do Zoom, like a bunch of boxes, because kids will know that you're watching. What's really cool about Dscout is that observers are actually not shown when you're doing remote sessions, which is really neat. It's just the moderator and then the participants. And there are other platforms, I think, that do the same thing. Another method card from the website called Camera Cues has been really helpful for me. That's a way to show parents how to orient the computer screen with a tablet to be able to show both the kid's face and the screen. So you should check that out. And then another method that I've used remotely that I've really liked is screenshot survey. So in this method, you print out, you would think that would be something you could only do in person, where you print out different screens of an app, and so that you could ask kids about those screens and not on the interactive platform. But what I've done in kind of an asynchronous remote setting is create a little booklet of all the screens of the experience that they're testing, and then have parents record their kids giving a walkthrough of the app, going from page to page to explain it. And that allows me to see their mental model of how the game works, which has been incredibly helpful. So those are just a few things. And I'm not paid by Dscout or anything, but I am talking at the Dscout conference in a month. So
Kylie, put the link to your event in the chat. I think
sure,
people,
definitely
should know about it. Courtney,
Yeah, I would say similar to Kylie, these panel research with regular touch points with families has been so helpful to have the sort of like expert of kid experts who are coming back to you and telling you how to improve your product. And just having that level of trust, reducing the amount of time for setup has been really helpful. And using similar platforms like Recollective, where you'll have like video walkthrough type submissions, so they can do remote testing, whenever it works for their schedule, and just sort of send in, what they have. Which, to be fair, all of these tools have been available pre-pandemic. It's just like it's like a new spotlight on just how powerful and how flexible they are. That's been really exciting. For me, also just thinking about two other things that we've seen in testing is one, really, especially because they work with preschoolers, letting them sit wherever and however they want, in a way where, when doing testing in a lab setting, it can be pretty rigid. We try to be flexible because they're kids and say like, hey, yeah, do you want to sit at this, at this table on a chair? Do you want to sit on the floor? But when they're home, they can just be super comfortable, and they can be as wonderfully weird as they want to. So if they are comfortable sitting with like one leg up in the air, leaning against the dishwasher in the kitchen, and the parent or the grown-up is just like, that's actually how my kid typically sits and plays with their tablet, then sure, let's go for it. And just seeing a lot of inhibitions sort of relax once both the parent and the child can see, or I'm sorry, the caregiver and the child can see that we are okay with your child taking any posture that is comfortable for them, and it's all normal to us. So there's that. Another is what's really interesting, has been challenging with parents in our sessions, because we're working with really young children. Obviously, we want to parent there, for safety reasons and wanting to make sure the child feels comfortable, but also there's a new level of trying to mitigate parent interference that has come into play. So what's been really helpful is actually giving parents a job. So saying like, hey, your child way better than we do. There are going to be like micro facial expressions that they might make, or really slight things in their posture that, like, if you can just watch as your child is playing and like take mental notes of this, and like, I'd love your help with just like translating all of these small but significant things about your child, that gives them, that makes them feel empowered. We want them to feel empowered too. Like, we really value their, everything they do as parents for keeping their children alive, but also the time that they give us for these playtesting sessions that are not, really critical, but it's a service, and an honor that they're inviting us into their homes. So I find that it's great to really empower parents, and to mitigate some of their interference, but they really do, like, this is the feedback that they give in helping translate their children's behaviors. It really is invaluable, and it can really shape. When we are working with a sample of like 8 to 10 kids, and making all these changes based off of 8 to 10 kids, the more insight that we have, and the more we can translate what we see, the better. So it's been really quite actionable for us, even though it started as a way to mitigate some parent and by parent interference, I mean parents telling their child how to play the game when we were trying to get a sense of how they would naturally, independently interact with it. So apologies for not clarifying that sooner.
Great. All right. Thanks, guys. This is the last question. And on deck, we have Sharon and Robert to answer the question. What is one piece of advice you give to a company that is just getting started playtesting with kids?
One piece is so hard. I would say hire a pro, even if it's just, part-time. You don't have to, if you don't have the head count right at that moment. I think all of the panelists here would have plenty of people to recommend. But recruitment's probably going to be your biggest challenge, because you don't have a panel of families set up yet, and you probably don't have a budget yet to work with an outside recruiter. And so you can use things like Peach Jar and other avenues have been cropping up, which is great. It breaks down that barrier between you as a researcher and the families you're trying to reach through schools. I would just work with your with your sales department on exactly who you reach out, but basically a school will send an announcement on your behalf about your research program. That's what it does. And there are others as well. If you have hardware, then you've got to do things like, I've actually had some luck on Nextdoor, not a lot, but it just takes 1 or 2 families to come in, have a good experience, and then they start telling all of their friends, and you start growing things that way. If you have a teacher friend who will allow you to do pullouts, I've seen really great success with that model. Again, it just takes one and you get a whole bunch of kids all at once. Tremendous.com is one of my favorite tools for startups, because this is for gift card dissemination. It's not going to cost you really anything, and it's a very easy tool to use. And at the end of the year, it spits out a form that says, here are the people, to prove to the IRS that they didn't make more than $600, over the year, so you're covered for everything. So those are just some very quick and dirty things. Basically, hire somebody if you can, and if you can't, definitely check out the website. You're marrying the combination of UX research best practices and working with kids best practices. And so those are the skills that you're really combining. So if you kind of think about it that way, that's kind of, you can see where the holes are and figure out how to fill them in.
Sharon, can you quickly share the name of the tool again?
So Peach Jar is one, tremendous.com is for the gift cards. There are others out there like them, I believe, but this is who I've been using for a while now, and they're just great. They allow, you can send a branded email to participants. It's very easy to set up. And then the recipient gets to choose their store that they want to spend that money on, which is great. You can do it any amount. And if you do, you could do it, you can pay Tremendous via credit card, and they'll charge, it's the standard nominal fee, right? If you connect it to your bank account, they don't even charge anything over that. So it's literally face value of your award is all you're paying, which for a startup is really great, right? Because if you're really watching pennies and making sure that every dollar goes to research versus overhead.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Robert.
Yes. So Sharon, I'm not going to add to those practical resources. That's fantastic. I completely echo everything she said. Hire a professional, even if it's part-time. It could be a doctoral student. Make totally free, right? Email, contact department heads and lab heads at your local research institution, which, especially if it's a public institution, exists to serve the public. And even in private institutions, these things are funded by money from the American people. So there is that onus on academia to serve the public. So I just echo all those things. But to add to that, one really important thing that I learned from one of my mentors, Dr. Megan Rothschild, who's here on this call, is how important it is to maintain that connection to the child. And it is remarkable how many people spend 40 hours a week, 50 hours a week, programming some app for a 5-year-old to learn math, and haven't even been around a 5-year-old in years. So here's a bit of practical advice. Find a 5-year-old and hang out with that person. I mentioned before the fake it till you make it, just like test with an internal kid, a relative, a neighbor, something like that. But even deeper than that, even more preliminary, is for anyone in this space, you're writing a TV show, you're writing a song, whatever it is, find that kid and just spend a little time with that kid. That's going to open up the window to you, to get you thinking about different ways to iterate what it is you're working on, and also why you're doing what you're doing. So thanks to Megan for that, and for just kind of imbuing our whole culture to be really kid focused. Kid focused first. Research is a part of being kid focused.
Great. Thank you, panelists. Those are all the questions I have for you today. But before we get on to the Q&A, I'm actually going to ask Kathy to give us a really brief demo of, we're not going to have a lot of time for the Q&A, but we're going to have Kathy give a demo of this Playtesting with Kids website that people keep talking about. So we'll do that. And if we have time afterwards, then we will fire up the live Q&A. Otherwise, if you have questions that are for one specific panelists, feel free to stick it in the chat as you guys have been. Kathy.
Yeah, I will be quick so that we have time for some questions, but wanted to highlight some things on the playtestwithkids.org website. So here there is a methods section that if you bring that up, you're able to sort by the different categories of methods. General tips is kind of like child development 101. How do you interact with kids? How to start a session and end the session, usability, which we discussed, can kids use your products, and then engagement, do they enjoy it? And then if you pull up any of these cards, young or older, which I pulled up earlier, usually we included a verbatim script that just says inspiration for teams to use, but you're welcome to, use your own language for it. On the left side is who you'd use this method with, when you would use it. And case studies are great. It's seen all of the methods in action. And so multiple companies, Sharon's, who's here at Square Panda, have contributed case studies to this section of the website where you can see exactly what their research questions are, what their process was to address those research questions and learn from them, what their findings were, and how it impacted the way they designed the product. Everything from small companies who tested with just 5 or 6 kids to larger companies. And then the last section that I want to highlight is the resource section. Recruitment, like these are links to outside resources that we thought would be useful. For crafting a lesson plan, we actually have Sesame Workshop contributed a sample testing protocol, and there's another template that you can pull up as well. But yeah.
Great, thank you. And the other thing that Kathy didn't point out, but is there, is a little, if you guys have questions today that you don't think of until tomorrow, or questions about today, think about it till tomorrow, and you want to reach out to any of the panelists here, there's a link on that website that says contact us. And if you send your question there, then one or maybe a few of the panelists today will get back to you with an answer. So do that. Okay. Let's see.
And if you have methods to share or want to contribute a case study, feel free to, I'll also put in an email address at the bottom or in the chat. So
great, thanks, Kathy. Otherwise, we have like 5 minutes for a Q&A, or really just 4, because I want Scott to have a minute to wrap us up. But does anybody in the audience have a question that they want to raise their hand for? Because otherwise there is one question in the chat that it looks like, oh, I don't know. I mean, Sharon and Robert, you guys seem to have answered a question, but does anybody in the audience have a live question that they'd like to ask of the panelists?
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I'm not even really sure how to frame my question, but I'm just kind of curious about how children with special needs are incorporated in playtesting, or if that's more just like dependent on the product, or yeah, if they're included like in general. Thank you.
Yeah. I'll jump in really. Oh, sorry. Sharon.
No, please go ahead.
The short answer is I'm sure it's different at every company. For us at Noggin, we definitely look at, there are certain particular products or things that we might be working on where we will really want to make sure that we include children with special needs. So that varies from like, physical disabilities. For example, if we're working on something that requires a lot of movement, like dance or yoga or something where we want to involve children physically, we want to see how we can make sure we're adapting any movements that we're demonstrating to best support children who might have any physical limitations. And I would say for some other pieces of content, it can be more difficult if we need children who are verbal and won't get upset by like the content. So it sort of depends on the needs, and we want to be really sensitive about that too. So if we are, and when we do, we will try to have children, for example, on the spectrum involved with like all play testing. And when we do, we have really explicit descriptions for the parents about what they'll see to make sure that there's nothing in there that might be a little bit triggering for them or upsetting. So it just takes another level of making sure we're checking in and disclosing as much information to the parent ahead of time, or letting them review something ahead of time, and then really weighing that with you know, how much we really can address with the product within the timeline.
Let's take one more panelist to answer this question. I forget who is going to try, but
just
Sharon,
one
yeah.
little thing to add. I completely agree. I think it is important to have a broad spectrum of kids in your playtest for sure. One thing I've just in my experience is that sometimes you get an overabundance just because of the recruitment process until you have like your panel, you know, established. But especially with slightly older kids, I've noticed that it's a way for parents just like, my kid who's kind of special needs a lot of activities, and where can I put them, sort of thing. So I started, you know, adding in as part of the screener a question. You can't just add, you know, it's just like, do you have any you know, developmental concerns? Can't remember exactly. I have to go back and look at the screener question, but there's a way to ask that question which will improve your odds of getting an honest answer. And that's the key, because a lot of parents are not honest about this, even though they know. And you want to get representation, but not so much that it's going to skew everything for the rest of your audience.
great. Okay, so we have one more minute, and I just want to thank all the panelists and Kathy for your great answers to all the questions we had today. And I'd like to turn it back over to Scott to help close us out.
Lori, thank you very much. And thank you all for attending. Thank you, Kathy and Catherine, the Cooney Center, our panelists, CMA National for their support to help bring this event to everyone who is interested in participating. But anyway, I would like to say thank you all very much for coming. If you are a CMA member, thank you so much for your membership and your participation. If you're new to CMA, please consider joining. We are a nonprofit organization that specializes in promoting and helping out the interests of people who work in the children's media space. And that means a lot of different areas, not just linear, not just interactive and apps. It's also toys, a whole bunch of things. I hope we get to spend time together again at a future event. Thank you so much for your time. Wishing you the very best success with all of your future children's media creations.